Hey, you guys, look at this cozy little friend I found. Say hello. This guy I found in a classroom, and in fact, you can take a look and see if this might be your classroom. I can give you some hints. It's the biggest classroom in the whole school. Let me turn it this way to see if you can. I can't see too much more. And I am sitting in your place of peace, and it is just so cozy. I met this little guy while I was here, and he's going to sit on my lap while I read you guys one of my absolute favorite books in the whole world. Some of you have heard me read this book before, but even if you have, I hope you can still enjoy it because it's just one of those books that you could read over and over and over, or I could. This book is called The Big Orange Splot, and you can tell it is very well loved. This book has been around for a long time, and in fact, if you can imagine two things. One, imagine that I used to be 8, because it is true, I did used to be 8. And when I was 8 in 3rd grade, my teacher, whose name was Mrs. Vedavati, which took me probably till like winter break to be able to say out loud when I was 8. Anyway, she read this book to us when I was in 3rd grade, and I loved it so much that I went home and I told my parents how much I loved the story Miss Vedavati read, and I told them all about it and the name of it and everything. And guess what? My sweet parents bought me this book for my 3rd grade birthday, my 8-year-old birthday, and I have had it ever since. Now, don't worry if you're wondering, oh no, what happens if she ever loses that book? I do have a backup I got at Powell's. But I really do treasure this one. And I'm going to actually read you the first version that I ever had. It is called The Big Orange Splot. And sometimes when I say the word splot and I'm reading it to a whole class, the whole class does this. Can you try that at home? It's a very fun noise. See if you can get your parents to make that noise, or whatever adults that you're hanging out with these days. Sometimes when I read it today, you'll notice that I actually do instead of the word splot, just because it's fun and it comes up a lot. So let's just jump right in. And you can be thinking the whole time I'm reading, I wonder why this is her favorite book. I wonder why she's loved this ever since she was 8. See what you think. The Big Orange Splot by Daniel Manus Pinkwater. Now, one thing you'll know inside of a book, there's the cover page again, is it'll tell you when this book was published. And for the adults that are listening with you, let them know this book was published in 1977. So think about that. It was a brand new book when I was turning 8 years old in 3rd grade. All right, let's jump in. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. He liked it that way, and so did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean's street. This is a very neat street, they would say. Then, one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. And he dropped that can, no one knows why, right over Mr. Plumbean's house. What a strange thing to have happen. Well, it made a big orange right on Mr. Plumbean's house. Oh, too bad, everybody said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. Oh, I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at that big orange for a long time. And then he went about his business. Well, the neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange. Somebody said, Mr. Plumbean, we really wish you would get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. Well, he got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. Pretty smart, Mr. Plumbean. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses all looked exactly the same. But Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. And I'm pretty sure there's a close up. Oh, yes. Check out his house. What are some of the things? Just tell me out loud. What are some of the things you see painted on that house? Oh my gosh. There was the big orange. There was the big orange. And there were little orange. There were stripes. There were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. Now, I'll tell you, those are all phrases from the 1970s that kind of mean that he's maybe kind of going a little nuts. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools, and that night he built a tower on the top of his roof. And then he painted a clock on the tower. Let's take a look. Another close up. What do you guys think? What's the problem with painting a clock on a tower, I wonder? Well, the next day, people said, Plumbean has lost his marbles. They decided that they would pretend not to notice. Ooh, it seems like that would be a tough house to not notice. That very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani, which I think is one of the most fun names of a tree you could possibly come up with. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. Now, I know I've had a lot to share about this book, but one thing I do want to point out is that's my favorite sentence in any book I've ever read anywhere. Listen to it again. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. Just one of my faves. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. They saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. Oh, Plumbean, you've gone too far. This used to be a very neat street. Plumbean, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all of my dreams, Mr. Plumbean said. The people went away. They asked the guy who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to go and have a talk with him. Tell him we all liked it here before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours so that we can have a neat street. Well, the man went to see Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees, drinking lemonade and talking all night long. And notice who's taking a little nap or sleeping through the night down here. A little alligator. Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. Well, I do not think that's what they meant when they said, go have a talk with Mr. Plumbean. What have you done to your house? They shouted at the man. My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all of my dreams, said the man who had always loved ships. Oh, he's just like Plumbean, the people said. He's got bees in his bonnet and knots in his noodle. Then, one by one, they each went to see Mr. Plumbean late at night. They would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day, that person would set about changing his or her house to fit their dreams. Ooh, I wonder what they're going to do to their houses. Oh my goodness. Take a look at these two. Oh my gosh, a hot air balloon. What do you think of when you see this house? I think of like a cupcake or something. Ooh, and look at these two pages. Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be so fun to have a moat around your house or have your house look like a museum? Look at the whole neighborhood. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the strangers would say, this is not a very neat street. But then all the people would say, our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we'd like to be, and it looks like all of our dreams. Oh my goodness. And then there's just a special picture of Mr. Plumbean's house. with the moon setting behind it. Well, I hope you have some ideas of why this became one of my absolute favorite books. Some of it is I just really love the community that they built in their neighborhood and how everybody got to make a really unique house that represented them somehow. So tonight, once it gets dark and you're done playing outside, because it looks like it's pretty nice out, I would love if you took some time and designed your own house that matches your dreams. If you were going to design your own house, what might it involve and what might it look like? I would just love, love, love to see that and hear about it once we are back in school. Okay, my little buddy here and I are just going to take a nice nap in this kindergarten room. Thanks, everybody.